Croeso and welcome to this special podcast. I'm John Wright, an HMI with Estyn, and I am delighted to be joined by two colleagues from Estonia, a country often seen as being at the forefront of digital innovation in education. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thank you. I am Grete Arro. I'm educational psychologist and I work in Tallinn University in School of Educational Science as a senior researcher. And yes, my research interests are related with many learning-related topics, from motivation to deep learning and so on. And this is probably also the reason why I belong to the AI Council of Estonian Ministry of Education and Science. And like my role, I don't know anything about AI, or I didn't knew before this council was founded in the end of 2023. But I'm there just to like, in a way, protect children, students, and learning from the possible impacts of this AI era.
And I'm Lisette Michelson, and I'm a regional coordinator in AI Leap. So in the capital of Estonia, in Tallinn. And also I have a background in special education and educational leadership. And my role, I think, in AI Leap is to support teachers about the learning and how learning and AI match, and how we can support learning with AI, not take it away.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks both. Well, I'm hoping that the focus of our conversation today is going to be around the use of AI in classrooms, both by teachers and by learners. Because something that seems to be becoming increasingly apparent, certainly in Wales, and I know in Estonia too, is that AI is becoming an everyday occurrence in our classrooms. And the challenge now doesn't seem to be simply about what the technology can do, but about how we use it and the ways that it can be used to support deep thinking and meaningful learning. So I think maybe a good starting point, if it's okay with you, might be to delve into what's been happening in Estonia in recent years. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that and the reason behind Estonia's engagement with AI at this national strategic level.
Yeah, actually, I think this is a long story. But somehow the ministry already before this really big AI explosion decided that actually we should keep an eye on the process. And as we slowly started to notice, everybody started to notice that children use it for learning, and it starts to redefine learning process as such. And this council that works voluntarily and voluntary basis just came together once a month to discuss and read and deal with the topics and try to understand better what's going on. And about a bit more than a year ago, actually what happened was that one entrepreneur offered that, we think that AI would benefit learning a lot. Let's give all the students in gymnasiums some tablets with AI, and so our education would boost. And then the scientists said that maybe this is not the best idea. And we started to think what would be the best idea. What should we do? So if we, from scientific evidence, know it's pretty sure that when we talk about actual learning, which should be really demanding cognitive process, full of effort, full of mistakes, full of warmth and security, and emotional, no emotional stress, and when we look at ordinary AI applications, this is quite the opposite of cognitive effort, and also evidence showed that just giving more AI to students doesn't help them, but could really have harmful and really fast harmful effects. And then we thought what to do with this good start, with this idea. And
And also we did a study in Estonia where we asked about students how they use AI or do they use AI, and it was like 90% of the upper secondary school students said that they are already using it, but 47% of the teachers said that they have never used AI. So we see the big gap there. Students are already using it, but teachers don't even know what it is, so they can't support. Actually.
So it's like COVID. It's inevitable. It's there. We have to deal with it, and it's so well how you said it, Lisette. It's students use it actually in learning process, but not for learning, because when learning process is maybe more oriented to just perform or do something, to just perform some homework or write some project or essay or referat or whatever, then what is important by this homework is the mental process that the student does when writing this work. But when this is in a way outsourced, then this wonderful, beautiful outcome nobody needs actually this essay. We only need this thinking process. And so we offered, as this idea was quite strong and it found some political support, let's do something. We don't know what to do. Let's do something. Let's start to run, but we don't know where. Scientists offered that, okay, let's see what kind of AI products are there on the market. And to be honest, brutally honest, we didn't like any of them, any of the edu versions of AI, because they were still not supporting what we think learning is. Learning means that you construct the knowledge, not that you look at the knowledge that somebody else constructs. It's like, with sport, if you imagine a situation where physical education teachers runs in the stadium, this thing where you run, and all students will sit and watch that. This is not physical education, but we kind of lose that understanding when it
comes to the classroom.
Yes. And then we just asked, could it be possible to develop something new, some AI that supports learning, because we see that many companies try to do it. And then we tried.
It's different.
We started the process with OpenAI for various reasons, and we are not fans of maybe big companies, but at the moment it is like this. But we don't know whether it will be changed in the future. Maybe we can do some European, Estonian, whatever version. But when we try to put the scientific input into this application development, which wasn't easy, but the point was the core idea. What we we had two core ideas, but one of them was to develop something which is like kind of anti-version of AI, not pleasing you, not giving you answers, but the reversed or upside down, to asking questions, to supporting your autonomous motivation to learn, to support your the meaningfulness of learning, and ask really good quality questions. So cognitively high-level questions, and when we dream, then also maybe support your self-regulation if you need those. If you have those problems, maybe support your metacognitive skills, maybe support your learning-related beliefs, and so on and so on. And of course, this is a hard task for a prompt. And we have something already, and of course, development never ends. But maybe the most important part in AI kind of leap isn't AI, but like change in the school culture, change of everything we do at school, because AI is kind of, it's kind of trigger that for us, it brought out problems. Actually, we have tried to put the spotlight on already many years. And AI is kind of for us kind of a Trojan horse when we introduce AI, but actually inside of AI is the scientific evidence and knowledge about what learning really is, and what this learning where the mental health and subjective well-being of the student is supported, what it means. And
so it sounds to me as though your experience in Estonia was being aware of the rise of AI, and through speaking to students and to teachers and undertaking surveys, that clearly pupils were using it already to a far greater extent than teachers were, and needing to kind of make sure that you address that in some way. I think that I've kind of remember a quote from your president who's said something around the idea being that in Estonia you wouldn't be the biggest users of AI, but you would be the smartest users.
Exactly.
So it's kind of thinking about using it in the right way, which kind of brings me on to the whole idea of, well, what do you do about that? And you're just starting to talk then, I think, about pedagogy and how you might approach that. So do you want to talk a little bit around that? And this, I like the idea of the Trojan horse in terms of getting some discussions around pedagogy in there as well. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, maybe I will start and you can add more information. For us, we thought, how can we go to schools, how we can give them the knowledge we have already, and how they can think along with us. We didn't want to give them all the right answers because we don't have them either, but we wanted to have a process where we all think together and try to find the ways to use AI in a meaningful way, in learning, in assessment, in everything we do at schools. So we thought that the good way will be if we use professional learning communities. So we have people who will come from their schools in every month to our seminar, where we will talk about a little bit AI, but the more important part is for how to teach, how is the process of learning actually happening at classrooms. We talked about the ICAP model and everything else. So it's important for us that the teachers know what AI is, but the more important is for us how we use AI so it won't overpower our thinking, our critical thinking, and the studying will continue there, because it has been his issue for many, many years before, because we don't want to think. We want all the right answers. And we saw the teachers too. They didn't want to think with us together. They want all the answers right now. Give me the full product and we will go with it in the schools, at the schools, yeah. But right now we try to think together and try to learn together in our seminars. Then they will go to their schools and do the same things with their teachers. And they try to study together what is the learning in AI in AI field right now.
And actually it's so cool how you emphasized that I use often the parallel that learning is like a code and AI is just a one button on that code. And so we shouldn't, it's just a tool for learning. If it suppresses learning, if it harms learning, then we shouldn't use it. But if we find ways how it helps learning to happen, then we should use it. For example, and for me, and maybe we should mention that AI Leap, or this going to schools, relates at the moment only 10th and 11th grade in gymnasiums, so not the 12th grade and not younger students, because it's a kind of nationwide experiments and it's not fully like scientific project. Otherwise it wouldn't be allowed. None of the ethical committees would allow that. But of course, scientists are being part of the process all the time to advise this big process of AI Leap. But of course, you see everywhere trade-offs. So looking back of the process, of course, everybody thinks that, okay, maybe here or there things could be smarter, but okay, this, but at least the sample is quite limited. But what is the main idea, maybe one of the main pedagogical ideas that is inside of this Trojan horse? There are many ideas, of course, but the deepest idea is what we all probably know from learning science, from cognitive science, that learning only happens when the learner constructs the knowledge, and especially when it co-constructs with other people. So when we have really a well-designed interactive learning, we all know probably ill-designed instructions, but when it's really well-designed, it works really well. And when children come to school, they have the best learning environment because they have their peers, they have other students, they have teachers, everybody ought to be fresh. And they don't need, from my view, they don't need this AI there. But it might be that from time to time the student is alone, maybe 5% of the learning time. And when they're alone, when they need special pace for understanding something, and when they need somebody who is helping this Socratic dialogue, this step-by-step understanding through some topic, or to prepare for the next day. Maybe in the next day you start to build something great, something new together, but you need to prepare yourself. And maybe then this AI, what we try to develop.
Usage. We don't want to be a goal that all students will use AI, but we want it to be only a tool for learning. But if we don't need it, then we shouldn't use it too. But we have to find like the right places where it supports learning.
One thing that you mentioned there, and I think you were kind of talking around it, just to explain, if you could just explain it a little bit more, is the ICAP framework. Can you just talk around that a little bit and explain how that works? I know it's not a new thing. It's been around for over 10 years, but it seems to me like quite a powerful, simple model for ensuring effective pedagogy. So maybe just mention that.
Yeah, I would love to. So actually scientists have studied how concepts or representations in our mind develop for decades. And what is the problem of that science is it's kind of niche science. Nobody really understands what they're talking about. And it doesn't find its way into practice. And this is what I have perceived also a lot, that this the ideas how to understand why deep learning doesn't just occur itself. So explaining it has been hard. And 2014, it was published one empirical paper. It's kind of it's a review, but it has some meta-analysis traits. So it's a compilation of different empirical studies which compare what learning activities bring about most deep learning in a way that you understand the concepts the best way and the longest. And the ICAP, you should read it backwards. It says the core of learning is cognitive engagement. That is kind of effort and attention you collect when you try to understand the concept or acquire a new skill. So this mental power you take together. And of course, cognitive engagement is deeply related with emotional engagement and behavior one, but actually the cognitive is the most important. And there are levels of cognitive engagement, from passive one, for example, when you listen carefully for wonderful lecture, like everybody who are listening to this podcast, I congratulate you. You don't learn anything from it, so it's pointless. Podcasts are pointless.
Oh, don't say that.
No, they're not pointless. When wait a minute, wait, and so it means that you just listen or watch, but you don't do anything.
It will become your own.
Yeah, and the second level, according to this hierarchy, kind of a hierarchy, is active. So it means that you add some kind of motoric action. You maybe highlight something, maybe you look something in your hand, like, some seashell.
As you are listening to podcast, maybe you write something down.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, rewriting or making verbatim notes. And again, actually, what this evidence says, those both levels actually mean that learning hasn't started yet, but those levels are needed, especially this passive one. When you engage with the material in a passive way, this is of course needed, but why stop there? So the learning in its actual sense starts when your mode of engagement is constructive. So it means that based on that material you have, you are generative. You generate. You do something with it. For example, you generate a question, or solution, or conclusion, or comparison, or whatever, evaluation. So based on the material you have, you leave some traces. You do something. It can be really small one, but the point is, when you go and talk somebody about this crazy podcast, then you already are in this constructive cognitive mode, because you're explaining it. So if you, for example, self-explaining is a wonderful method for learning. So you try to explain something to yourself in your mind with different kind of words. And actually, our students, at least in Estonia, they don't know this is a learning, really powerful learning method. And the last one, this I is of course interactive. And it means that if well prepared and well organized, then being constructive together with other brains is the most effective. We are Estonians and we hate other people, but we still know that we learn the best when we are together, when we are in conversation, when we argue, when we ask somebody else to make it more explicit what you just said, and so on. So when there is a taking turns. So the core idea of interaction is taking turns and not mini monologues. Okay. And so it's
just lectures.
Exactly. Yeah, small lectures to each other, or let's share the work. This is not something like that, but we need. And this is the model. Actually, this is accessible model of learning. And this kind of simplification, but not oversimplification. And if you say that learning has to leave traces, everybody understand. And I really love this. The authors of this article, 2014, used the word generative, that this mode is generative. And we know that we have today generative AI. And what we have to emphasize is that still nothing has changed. We knew back then, knew probably 100 years ago, that learning only happens when the brain is generative, not when the AI is generative.
One thing we were talking this morning when we had a workshop with colleagues from Welsh Government and dysgu and so on, and you were talking about AI and how engagement with AI and the usual models that we use when we engage them, they really want to please you. Yeah. They don't want to challenge you. They want you to give you the answer. And again, you referred earlier on to some work that you've been doing with OpenAI to create a different model of ChatGPT. And I think you described it earlier on. You talked about it being just a little bit annoying in terms of being trying to please you all the time. It actually tries to annoy you a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about, because I think this then relates to what we've just talking about with the ICAP framework, and maybe just talk a little bit about how that works and how this newer model of ChatGPT that you're experimenting with works.
We have made it for students right now, and they have been using it for only 1 month. So it's a pilot right now, but it's like that. If I will ask the question from I don't know what, let's say, please tell me why planes fly. And then the ChatGPT won't give me the answer right away. It will ask why do you think they fly? I have to think something. Why? I can say, I don't know. Maybe it will give me some kind of things to think about. What do you think about that? Maybe, and it will ask again questions. It's like right now when we want to learn in classrooms, we know that if I'm a teacher and ask a question in our classroom and students answers it, maybe the answer is wrong. I won't say like it's wrong. I will ask, why do you think so? Please try to explain it to me. And I think it's the same, that we want that the model like try to open up the children's mind. It's not ideal right now. It doesn't always do it, but it's the idea about behind that.
Yeah, and actually, when we think about teaching, so actually, yeah, maybe building some kind of teacher Frankenstein is not our idea, but but in a way it is. So a teacher has to support motivation and be warm and love children and know how to support deep learning and so on. And also we want that the model should do everything of it. And we know that students might really struggle first when they start learning. They struggle with really like this internalized or intrinsic, like autonomous motivation. So they learn, but they don't know why they learn. They don't they haven't internalized the reason for learning. So maybe the hardest part for the model is to understand how to help the students find the reason for learning in a really supportive, friendly way. And second, also when this is a really good question, why planes really are in the air, how can they do it, is to collect the pre-knowledge. Actually, we know memory-wise, we know that in order to acquire new knowledge, also really important aspect is to activate misconceptions or right conceptions about the topic what you already have. So it can also ask a question, okay, do you know when you draw a ball, what happens, why it's in the air, for example, and so on. And but the point is, yes, this Socratic dialogue and good questions. And we just tried also this morning with your group, and we saw that, and it's we saw that the model, inside of the model is this little pleasing homunculus thing. But still, even if in one point it gives an answer just to help you forward, then right in the end it asks, okay, but why this answer is right? This answer is right, why this is? And actually, pedagogically, we all know this is quite good. Don't ever ask questions that start with if. Is it so or so, for example? But you can just say and turn it a wonderfully cognitively demanding questions. It is so. Explain me why. And this is and of course the as you probably all understand, it's when developers develop something, even if it's based on scientific theories, it should be trained on the questions and answers and reactions of the students. And this is actually what's happening at the moment. And when I said it should be annoying, we all know that everything digital, also learning, it shouldn't be addictive.
Okay.
So, and learning can be addictive, and when learning is addictive, it's really good. And this is probably healthy addiction, but they should be addicted of this dopamine of getting new knowledge or understanding new things or constructing the knowledge themselves. And we have also built I wouldn't say small, quite good, quite big research project to measure the effect of this tool, of this upside down AI, and one thing what we also tried to look, of course, anonymously are the chats. So, for example, whether the children, when they have that kind of application, whether they start to construct more knowledge, whether their input gets like more, they have more volume. and
the feedback from the students that we have right now is that it's a little bit frustrating because I want to have the answer right now. Why you won't give it to me? It's they are not used to learning how the learning process is.
And this is the reason why the biggest part of this AI leap is the school culture change where needed. So of course in every country, schools are really diverse, and some need more help for that, some less. And we know that many countries are competitive. Estonia is competitive, and we know this is not good at all for deep learning and for good society. And this is and we know that this is one of the reasons why actually students really don't know what is actually the learning, what they have to do. They have to do mistakes. Learning is very slow process. It has to be effortful only, and it's not about the performance, short-term performance and fast forgetting, and those are the topics we can never blame. Children, students. We cannot blame also technology. We only can blame us adults when students doesn't know how to learn.
So it seems to me that you're trying to develop a model of AI here, which acts as a thinking partner for students and prompts and provokes their thinking rather than suppressing it. I've heard you talk previously about suppressing learning, so we're trying very hard not to do that.
Exactly.
Which kind of, and again, we were just coming to kind of touch on this really. So one of the really important things from what you're saying is the ability of teachers to be able to use AI in the right way. Because even the model that you're describing now, which you're saying that's a better model, but it's still got flaws. So it's still important that teachers are able to use it in the right way. So in terms of that developing of teachers' skills and that professional learning aspect. You talked about professional learning communities, and I know you're quite involved in this, aren't you, Lisetta?
Yeah.
But could you just talk around how that's worked across Estonia?
We have 9 regional coordinators who are in contact with schools, and we try to help them to learn in the professional learning communities, but also we try to give them the knowledge and also practical things to do there. But we have Moodle, where we have different materials for them that they can use, watch. They don't have to use anything. What we are giving to them, but it's opportunity. And for us, it's also important that they do it voluntary, that it's not compulsory for them, because we know that learning won't happen when they feel like they can't decide it by themselves. But also I see that it's very hard to how I will say it. I think it's very hard for teachers to think along with us, because it's like little bit like a fixed mindset there. I know already what we have to do, and I don't think it's better to do it this way sometimes. And also maybe what is the good outcome is if there are some teachers who are using it and they have a good experiences, then other teachers might want to try it too.
So it's kind of demonstrating the benefits of it, because there are benefits in terms of teachers' efficiency, but also potentially used in the right way, thoughtfully, as we've been talking about up to this point, benefits in terms of learning if it's used in the right way. But it's persuading teachers that there are those benefits and that they then choose to take it on, rather than it being something that you have to say to people, you've got to do this.
Yeah, but I think what's important to know is we have schools that already are doing these things.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter to other schools because they will say, we have different school, we can't do the same things, it doesn't apply to us. And so for us, it's so hard to make it seem that it actually applies to every one of us because the children will need it to be that kind of way. But I hope that when we continue with this AI leap, I think 1 year isn't enough. We have to change the mentality, we have to change the beliefs, I think, and it takes time.
And also it's kind of like building a plane while flying with it. So we don't have anybody has the solutions, and I really like that this impression we make is that we are not doing any AI leap because of AI, but because of if we don't do anything, then students, they use AI anyway. And what has to change is the learning process where like unhelpful AI use would be pointless. So students feel that, okay, I rather, if I have to learn alone and I have nobody to help me, then I have possibility to choose like ordinary AI, which doesn't help me to learn, or there's another version which is a bit annoying and which asks questions and I have to think there. And I know that when I have this one and only life, then spending it in that way is more reasonable for me. But we know that having this will and this understanding in students is all the work of the teachers and the educators and the adults. Can I bring one wonderful example of AI use in the school? Yeah. And I got it from a wonderful Belgian colleague, Belgian expert who is also in with the research group studying possibilities to use AI at schools in a wise way. And it was a group of quite young students, I don't know, third grade or something like that, who doesn't like to write so much handwriting. So we all know that children might struggle with handwriting. And the AI use was like that the teacher told the children, and maybe it was even in foreign language, I don't know, or in I don't remember that so well, but please write how your avatar should look like. And children, and handwriting, and children described, and then teacher said that yes, AI will draw that avatar of you based on your description. And then the teacher collected them and gave them to AI. AI draw them, and then children got them back and wasn't satisfied at all. This wasn't absolutely what I was meaning. This is wrong. And then they started to write again with a real hazard, and they were really excited about it, to write with their hands. And then they made it better, then better version came out and so on. And the point was handwriting. And children were really they really wanted to do it, because handwriting is also a mean, not the goal itself, in a sense. And but the AI use by teacher could be really a really small thing, and the computers or digital technology doesn't have to be in contact with children in this process. But I would like to collect many other that kind of examples for teachers.
And actually we have very many good examples. And for us, it's also important to spread the good examples in Estonian too. If the teacher is doing already something good, then let's see the example in our seminars. Let's talk about it, why it is good, why it helps. And I think it's so important too that we talk these things through, because sometimes it seems very good, but actually doesn't support the learning.
Okay. One of the we published a thematic report in October of last year around to give a picture of how AI was being used in Wales at that time. I have to say, I mean, it was probably 12 months ago, maybe slightly more than 12 months ago, we did the research for that report. And things have moved on hugely even since then. But one of the things that we're finding, which I think is still true, is that there are some schools which are engaging with it more. And even within schools, there is maybe one or two teachers that are engaging with it and other people who aren't at all, either in the sense of using it to support teaching and learning, or just kind of not engaging in it with pupils or helping pupils to understand it either. And I think one of the challenges that we might have in Wales is it's a small but diverse country, in the sense you can go from Cardiff, where we are now, with some very large urban schools, to maybe somewhere nearer where I live in the middle of Wales, where there are very small, rural 2-teacher schools. And I'm just wondering, is there anything we can learn from Estonia in terms of making sure that they get the same experience, they have the same kind of access to professional learning and the same kind of input? Are there any lessons around that?
I think it's very similar to Estonia. Yeah. We have kind of the same things, and for our seminars, we have all these teachers together from smaller schools and elite schools, and they will share their knowledge, their what they have done. And also right now, because of the coordinators, we go there in the schools and try to help them there where they are. We don't expect them to be here or here. We will go there and start in the point where they are in that schools. And it is that we need a lot of people, people who are ready to go there and help. But also, I think we can't do this at all size fits all, because then someone will have something from the seminar and others will come there, and it's so overwhelming. And I better not do anything at all, because I didn't it's expense is so much more than the value, I say.
And actually the question is always, whether it's big school or a small one, what is my educational goal? What is the learning goal? What I want to achieve? AI isn't the goal. Yeah. It's a machine. It's a tool. And when I have educational goal that I cannot achieve so well, and maybe AI has makes this process somehow more smart or more smooth in a way. For example, puts your children excitedly to handwrite, then why not to use it? Or when you don't want to do some free retrieval yourself, you can ask, prompt your AI, okay, I have that material, I love to know those topics well by heart, and I want this knowledge to be transferable. Help me in this free recall or free retrieval tasks, and for example, offer me a good interval for practicing my free retrieval, and give me enough different, superficially different contexts that are actually addressing the same background idea. And for students, for teachers, it might be hard actually to invent all those different tasks. And also we know that there are so many pedagogical ideas that scientists say that it works. So one big idea is cognitive conflict. So if you give a cognitive conflict situation to students, it's really fruitful for learning. And maybe I don't have any ideas, and then I can use to give the material about that. I have that level of class, that kind of pre-knowledge, so many special education needs inside. Help me with designing that. But it means, of course, that you have to prompt really specifically.
Yeah, I think one thing that is important for us too, yes, we are gathering the materials. They are doing at schools, and we try to share them with everyone. But also it is important to understand why we are doing these things that are in the materials. So that's why we are doing all the seminars behind that we don't just give everything in the plate.
I think that's a really important message, what you said earlier on about AI not being the goal, and about it being, if it's appropriate to use it, if is it going to enhance learning in some way or other. And I think that reflects our approach towards AI when we're working with schools, inspecting schools and so on. We're not inspecting AI, we're inspecting teaching and learning. And if AI is used as part of that process, like any other tool, is it helpful? Is it supporting the teaching and learning that's taking place? So I think maybe just to do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, just to kind of finish off. Maybe we can think about where this is such a rapidly developing field. It's changing all the time. The models are changing all the time. The AI tools are changing all the time. But if we could be transported into the future in 2 years' time, and maybe thinking about where Estonia might be, where do you think AI in education will be in 2 years' time?
Well, my another identity is environmental psychology, and I don't think that AI develops like a separate entity in this world. We are in the area of polycrisis, environmental crisis, different crises of environment, of democracy, and so on. And I don't know so much about AI developments. I don't know when the investors want to get their money back, because it's all, of course, this is not free, what versions teachers have and so on. But it might be that in 2 years' time, any Estonian students cannot allow financially to use AI. And this is one reason why we always emphasize, and maybe we also forget to emphasize it enough, when we develop whatever tool for learning based on AI, the point could give them transferable learning skills, learning competence. So if I switch off all AI, maybe all internet, maybe all electricity, then you should know how to learn. So if those skills are not transferable, then we actually have failed. And I know I'm kind of utopic in that sense, but this should be in mind all the time. So the point of the learning is not to learn only in this learning context, but for other contexts. So in 2 years' time, it might be that we don't have any learning related AI at all. It might be, but let's hope that business as usual will continue. And I think actually related to that topic is that the younger generation is well informed of the environmental impact of AI. So every stupid use, pointless use of AI actually is kind of question of ethics as well. But the question is, if those developments follow, maybe they grow smaller. I mean, maybe we get rid of really big models and have smaller skills, more specified agents or skills, or how they were called, for specific functions. For example, in the school level, we know that mathematics is a big problem. We have math anxiety. We have this mathematical thinking is something really special. Maybe we have really specialized and well-functioning and well-feedbacking special agents for mathematics. For students who need more one-to-one time with for understanding, because we know that everybody can learn mathematics, but so many children doesn't believe that, and maybe we have other that kind of developments, but maybe we don't have anything. I don't know.
But maybe on another perspective, right now in the pilot year, we had only 10 and 11 class teachers. And the 11th and 10th class. But next year, we know that we want to go to vocational schools and we want to go to the 1st to 9th grades. And our hope is that after 2 years, all teachers know what the learning is. And
With or without AI.
without AI.
Yeah.
We know we want to use AI with meaning and with supporting learning, but I think it isn't the goal at all.
No. I think that's really interesting, because all the conversations that we've been having over the last 40 minutes or so has been consistently moving away from the technology back towards the teaching and the learning, which again, when I refer to the report that we published last October, that was the key message, that this is all about effective teaching and learning, whether that's with AI or without AI, and you've got to keep coming back to that, and about knowing what good learning looks like. So thank you both for that. Just to kind of draw things together a little bit, it seems to me that what we're saying is that AI really isn't about replacing good teaching. It's about using it where it's appropriate. It's about using it thoughtfully, and it's about using it to support learning if appropriate. But it's about an intelligent and thoughtful approach towards it as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thanks both. So again, thank you very much for your time. You can find more information about Estyn and our approach towards AI by visiting our website. You'll find some video case studies there around the use of AI that came from our thematic report published last year. You'll also find hot off the press our latest thematic report, which is around the use of AI in further education. And it just remains for me to thank you as listeners for taking the time to listen to this discussion. And again, finally, for my two guests for participating. And it's been great to talk to you both. Safe travels home.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.